Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, everyone. Ryan here. Today, we're revisiting some old friends and making some new ones along the way with Mercuriall's new home for their plugins going forward, Mercuriall Ampbox. If you've watched any coverage on Mercuriall's previous releases, you're probably feeling a bit of deja vu right now, and there's a reason for that. First of all, this is essentially the same exact UI as seen on the Euphoria, which was Mercuriall's last big VST venture. But it also includes such familiar faces as the U530 and Reaxis preamps, which are some of my favorite releases from them. But now, instead of living in each of their own individual homes, they are grouped in the all-in-one suite called Ampbox, which before I go any further, I would just like to say thank you, Mercuriall, for listening to a request that I've been saying for years now, literally years, about plugins of this kind, because it makes so much sense, and they're not 100% of the way there, but this is a great next step towards unifying their entire platform and delivering a better, more modular product for the end consumer. So what is Ampbox then exactly? Well, as I sort of casually mentioned there, this will be Mercuriall's main platform going forward for new amplifier releases. So this will be a free download for anyone to check it out. If you don't own any preamp, or maybe you own one and want to try out one that you don't, then you'll get some mutes every minute or so, like you would with a lot of trial software. But everything else in the box is included, which includes the same noise gate, wah pedals, a couple overdrives, distortions, parametric EQ, delay, reverb, chorus, all these things that we saw in Euphoria. And you can use all this stuff with previously released preamps like the Reaxis and U530 without having to pull up an additional 1 or 2 VST slots in your signal chain. This is exactly the kind of thing I've been wanting from the start, because a lot of this functionality, like the delay reverb, was present in Reaxis. It just looked different. And in this case, since there's only, about a half a dozen releases from Mercuriall total, I don't have too much of a problem with them kind of tailoring them to each individual experience and making them have separate layouts and UIs, but it makes sense now that it's all in one place, and I definitely commend them for it. What does that mean then for current owners of older Mercuriall software? And what about Spark or SS11X? Unfortunately, those have not made its way to Ampbox quite yet. They're still working on it, from what I've been told, though I'm sure it'll get there one day, probably some modeling differences and stuff they have to straighten out. But overall, it does give them a nice place to launch new products going forward, which is one less roadblock, and I'm sure they can work on that in parallel. And not to mention that even though those haven't made it yet, it's still benefiting a huge percentage of Mercuriall's user base. So I'm glad it's there. I just do look forward to seeing some of the more British flavored, tube sounds make its way over here in later revisions, because I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Additionally, all existing owners will be able to keep and reactivate and download the older versions that they purchased of U530 and Euphoria and Reaxis, but going forward, only the Ampbox versions will be sold, which is certainly not a bad thing, because look at all the additional features you're getting here. Now, as you might expect, this isn't going to impact Euphoria users too much, because the effects that are here were already present on Euphoria, except for the new distortion model, the DS1, always on board for more boss pedals, so keep them coming. But for those of us that still like the 530 in re-axis, you now get a few new features to play with that wasn't just in the Euphoria plugin itself with the power amplifier section. So just like the Euphoria power amp, you have an excursion switch to kind of change the negative feedback in different sections of the frequency response, in addition to the same presence controls and Class A, B, Class A pin-tone triode switches, which is really cool. Especially like playing with these with the re-axis model to get maybe a faster clean sound in Class A, or get some different tones between maybe like the 2C plus channel on lead 2 and emulate a real 2C plus power amp, or then go to pin-tone for the red channel, so on and so forth. So that's a welcome addition and something that I think could help in your tone sculpting. Finally, it should be pointed out that just like Euphoria, this is a semi-fixed signal chain. I say semi because there are a couple places that you can move around, like the delay can go parallel or before the reverb, which is nice. And of course, if you change around the overdrive pedals, obviously that's not the exact same signal chain, but overdrives always go before distortion, which always go before preamps, so on and so forth. So you can't really move, the parametric EQ before the amplifier or anything like that. Some people might want more modularity, but frankly, I'm okay with this. I think this fits, the 95%, if not more, use case, and it does feel reminiscent of some older amp modeling software or even hardware that, it's kind of like, this is the way we designed this software and intended for you to use it. I'm okay with that. There's plenty of more expensive competition that doesn't even give you that much choice. So, I respect it. One of the main features that I wanted to show off in this video is my presets. So Mercuriall reached out and gave me the opportunity to make some presets for them. I'm recording this prior to release, so I don't know if they kept all of them. Regardless, I will put them all in a drive folder below just in case any of them didn't make the cut. Don't blame them. Some of them are ridiculous, but that was the point. So thank you so very much again for letting me test this prior to release and get my hands on it and make some stuff that will hopefully be useful for some of you that are just getting started with the software and need a place to begin before dialing in your own sounds. Ampbox isn't exactly about pushing new tones from Mercurial, at least at this point. I'm sure it will be sooner rather than later when new products get released. But ultimately, with everything that's packaged in it right now, we could achieve almost all of these sounds, if not the exact same sounds, using third-party plugins, but especially grouping together at least one or two or maybe three different Mercurial plugins together to get what you just heard. But it represents something that is equally important, if not more so, and that is listening to user feedback. Now, believe me, being a content creator on YouTube, user feedback can be all over the place. It can be absolutely garbage, and you can't listen to too much of it. You have to stay focused and let it steer you or guide you to achieve your ultimate vision that you set for yourself. But when it comes to something like this, an all-in-one platform for your software company to launch new products and let the users experiment with different combinations and signal chains and have everything that they've ever bought from you available in one place is just the obvious move for me. And Mercurial is not exactly a big team, right? I mean, this is kind of an endeavor that is a labor of love for these guys. So if they can do it, I don't feel like there's any excuse that some of the competition, if you want to call them competition, can't. I know they can. You know, we live in a world of amplitubes, of bias effects, Line 6 Helix native. Waves has their own little signal chain manager you can put in one slot. I'm using it on a current project, so you can load up like 15 plugins in one space, and that's awesome. But for whatever reason, there are certain other plugin companies that have released far more plugins than Mercurial, and yet they expect you to not mix and match. They expect you to use only what's in the box in this kind of curated way that can feel really restrictive at times. And if you want to get any crazier than that, then you got to load up 2 or 3 different plugins, chain them together, and goodbye to your CPU utilization a lot of the time. So Mercurial can do it, everyone else can too. Hopefully this will be a bit of a push in that direction for others. But as always, very pleased with what we see here. Anything that's an upgrade or free to existing users is always great, and they're setting themselves up for future success, which I'm always in favor of. Can't wait to see what's coming out next, and can't wait to see whenever Spark and some of their other previous releases get added. Would love to see some of their free stuff like the JMP or the JCM 800 preamps added, if that would ever be feasible. That'd be cool. We'll see. Before I go, I'll leave you guys with a few of the potential improvement ideas I have for Ampbox and the overall architecture of Mercurial's releases. I definitely think prioritizing getting the older releases like SS11X and Spark in here should be #1 priority for this, in addition to, you know, releasing new stuff in parallel to keep this growing. But as far as the core offerings that are here, first and foremost, the cab section. What's here is really good. You know, the V30, T75, Greenback, K120, that like kind of covers most of, I think, a lot of people's metal needs. It would be nice to see maybe like a 65 watt Greenback and maybe like even a 30 watt Greenback, you know, just different variations thereof. Perhaps even a 1x12, 2x12, something like that. But even if they can't make that happen feasibly to, you know, grow the cab list into the dozens, which I can understand why they wouldn't want to, then maybe just adding a few more microphone variations would be nice. I don't know exactly who provided the cabinets to Mercurial or if they shot them themselves, but if they still have access to those same cabs, adding some Neumann microphones or maybe like a 421, just different condenser and dynamic setups would be nice to have. They do have one ribbon, which is nice. Maybe like an M160 would be cool as well. Just a few more options to you know, get more variation out of this. I do feel like between the different preamps, I end up dialing in very similar cab sounds, which is where external impulse responses definitely come in handy, which I'm glad they do give you the opportunity to use those. They just don't include them in any presets yet. Hopefully they'll look into adding those someday. And finally, as I said before with Euphoria, the delay and reverb could definitely use some additional models at the very least, and maybe an overall, well, overhaul. The delay certainly sounds good in different configurations. If they would just add a few more time modes, like a ping pong or a true stereo, you know, something like the Fibonacci sequence, 61.8% on one side, 30% on the other, whatever. Having the low cut, high cut especially helps to emulate, you know, BBD or stuff like a tape saturated delay sound in addition to the drive control. So I think they have a really good overall setup here to emulate different sounds within one model. Just having a few different ping pong or stereo options would be really nice, because for me, the ×2 on left or right doesn't really have the same spread as I would like. Finally, with the reverb, something as simple as a couple toggle switches might do the trick. You know, something like a spring plate hall, just generic stuff. So it doesn't have to be crazy for this kind of plugin. If I want to go really balls to the walls with echo, I can pull up, you know, something like Valhalla, or even some of the Waves or built-in Cubase plugins I have. That's not a huge deal, but just to have it a little more comprehensive and to add things that I would have liked to make in my own presets, I think a few more modes would be nice. And maybe even a shimmer dial, you know, something just to cover again, those 95% of use cases outside of a simple hall or room reverb, because I just never felt like I could get quite where I wanted to with this thing. But good start. I'm very pleased with it as always. And like I said before, can't wait to see what they got cooking next. So any other questions and comments, as always, leave them down below. Hopefully we will see you sooner rather than later with new Mercurial stuff. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And we'll see you next time. Bye.